What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into the super wild card weekend edition of the NFL Weekly. Of course, with me, as always, my friend and co-host, Mr. Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I am doing great. Finally got through the very chaotic holiday season and feel like I'm grounded again. And so here we are, kicking off 2025, you and I. And wow, it seems like there's a lot on the table already.
Definitely, yeah. We had a lot to catch up on before we hit record, and obviously, we would be remiss if we to start this without kind of taking a moment to acknowledge, as we are recording. Let's see, the 9th of January. Obviously, it's a Thursday, and this first week of 2025 in the LA area has been very tough. Currently, dealing with, I'll be honest, I don't know what the number of fires it is up to, but it's not looking good up there in the middle of these Santa Anas. So obviously, our thoughts going out to everyone affected up in that area, and hopefully everybody is safe, and your life is a lot more important than your belongings. So if you're ever asked to evacuate, just get out of town and deal with everything else later.
Amen.
Anything that want to go there. So hopefully everyone is safe. But we are, of course, staring down a super wild card weekend. Before we get to that, kind of time to tie a bow on the season. Obviously, we'll get to Raider Jim's thoughts about the state of Raider Nation momentarily, but obviously 18 weeks, we all were kind of expected it to go by quickly, but goodness gracious, did it ever. A wild season. Comes down to, essentially a week 18 where there was essentially the only drama was around really surrounding Carson Wentz, and that ended very quickly. But Raider Jim, your thoughts on, the season overall, week 18, and then also most notably, essentially, this past Monday, what was normally called Black Monday. I don't know if we can still call it that, but when we do see all the head coaches that haven't already been fired essentially get the axe. We do know, of course, Antonio Pierce eventually got his. We'll get to that momentarily, but Raider Jim, your thoughts overall?
Yeah, regular season, when you look at the teams overall, as I have on and off, depending on what week people are tuning in and listening, looking at everything like a stock market, I'll tell you what, the stock on the Pittsburgh Steelers is really, really dropping quick. You should have sold that stock a few weeks back because, wow, they did themselves no favors at the end of the week or at the end of the season. Personal on individual levels, I think Caleb Williams has to go down as the biggest disappointment of the season from where I sit. That's me. But and then the other disappointment, and again, personally for him, with the performance he put out there for everybody, Joe Burrow, he threw for 4,900 yards, more than anybody else in football, and he's going to be watching it from the sidelines, and that's a travesty. And as you and I said, if they had anything that looked like a defense early on, they made a good run at the end of the season, but when you look at who they beat, it was probably some of those games where you would look at them and go, well, yeah, they should have won. So they did beat opponents that they should have beat. And then early in the season, though, they just had too many mishaps. They got themselves too deep of a hole. They couldn't climb or dig out of it. We'll get to the Raiders in a little while. Who were some of these other coaches that went by the wayside? Dennis Allen went in November. Robert Saleh, I still think Robert Saleh was one of the bigger screw jobs, because the only thing that the Jets handed him was he was kind of like a role player in the Aaron Rodgers reality show. And because of that, he was probably pulled him into the office and said, this is what you're going to do, whether you want to do it or not. You're not going to bench him. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. Not that they had a great depth at quarterback to save their season either. Jared Mayo, 1 year and out. And now, is this his fault? I really don't think it was, but again, I'm not, I don't own the team. So what can I say? But I think you'll see him again. I think he just needs to have better personnel, better opportunity, and maybe even a little more control of the reins when it comes to him. Give him his opportunities. If he really makes the calls and screws up, fine. But I don't think he was kind of almost, not quite a Jerry Jones situation that he was faced with, but I don't know how much he really had free reign to do whatever he felt was right. Aberflus in Chicago, nobody was surprised by that. But overall, got kind of exciting there towards the end. I don't know what I heard. So many people. I happened to be in Nevada on the weekend, and you would be surprised how many Bronco fans were running around just so proud of themselves for beating, the JV squad of the KC Chiefs. I mean, it was really kind of comical to listen to.
Yeah, well, I don't quite know if they will be singing the same tune this weekend when they do not face a JV team and have to go on the road to probably one of the toughest places to play in the playoffs, but we'll get to that matchup momentarily. I agree with you on most of those. I would say in terms of disappointment, I mean, for me, the biggest disappointment has to be the New York Jets. I know personally, neither one of us here on this podcast had high hopes for the Jets, but my goodness, I at least expected them to be even like a kind of a Bengals where they're going to put up 8-9 wins and we're going into week 18 where if something happens, maybe they sneak in, but even then they're not really a big time threat. But the Jets were essentially never a threat this season. And that's, considering, of course, Aaron Rodgers stayed healthy. And as you mentioned, it seemed like the early firing of Saleh, instead of kind of galvanizing the guys, it did the exact opposite. And I think he comes out looking like an absolute genius. And he might be someone that actually gets a head coaching job this cycle just because of how bad the Jets looked. So that, they're going to be looking. Now, one thing I will say when it comes to the head coach firings, a lot of talk already that Mike Vrabel is essentially a big reason why Gerard Mayo was one and done, was because Mike Vrabel is available. Obviously, he has ties with the Patriots. And that could be something there. Now, one thing that I did not realize until I think 2 or 3 days ago, and we brought him up a few weeks ago, but Bill Belichick obviously just got the job with North Carolina, the University of North Carolina. Bit of a head scratcher. His buyout is $10 million. But on June 1st of this year, it drops down to $1 million. Sorry, I didn't want to make that seem like it was $1, but $1 million. So again, I don't want to pull out my tinfoil hat, but there is an obvious reason for that being the case. However, that is a very long time to wait for a team. I mean, we're halfway through. I mean, we're already through OTAs. You're well into past the draft and free agency. So that's a huge gamble to take on Bill Belichick, but just something to keep in mind. But I do think the hottest head coaching name besides Mike Vrabel is obviously going to be Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator with the Lions. And who knows, maybe he decides to run it back again with the Lions. But overall for this season, I think, I don't want to say I was disappointed, but let's be honest. I mean, there was a lot of bad football teams out there, a lot of bad teams that were put together and teams that we knew were going to be bad. And I can and I'll even take the Cowboys out of the mix. I'll take the Niners out of the mix because you can blame injuries. But, some of these teams, to where the point where you see, if you have 3 wins and you win, you drop like 8 draft spots from the first overall pick to the 9th. That was going on like week 16 to 17. It was kind of crazy just because of how bad teams were. And at the end of the day, I love the NFL. It was great. But there was a lot of really, really bad football teams out there. And hopefully we have a little bit more drama heading into week 18, because that was the one thing this week. It was, I mean, even the biggest drama maybe, or the best game, was an absolute blowout with Minnesota and Detroit. And like I said, the biggest drama was, okay, can Carson Wentz lead it? And it felt like before you blinked, they were down 21-0 and the game was over. So no real drama there. Hopefully next year we do get a little more, but we're going to have plenty of drama this weekend. But before we get to that, we unfortunately do have to get the coroner's report on the Las Vegas Raiders season. Obviously I don't think there were too high of hopes in Raider Nation, but I think they were much higher than what they got. But without further ado, Raider Jim, your thoughts and your diagnosis for what has to be considered failed 2024 season.
Yeah, let me tell you, the Raider Nation. Now, the only thing worse and more frustrating than that, because of where they're located and because this is still considered San Diego market, etc., a lot of the Raider games, and I don't have the NFL package, a lot of the Raider games aren't even broadcast. The more disappointing thing than that is when you go sit in that stadium and watch the team play in person like I did on Sunday. Let me tell you, when you are sitting there and there's no commercials and you can put your eyes on every player and every scheme and everything going on, oh my gosh. I mean, I used to jokingly refer to a couple years back to the secondary as, they were in their Swiss cheese lineup because they had so many holes in it. That whole defense was holes. You can't rest on Max Crosby. They've got Robert Spillane, good guy, good linebacker, real, he's gung-ho. But man, he was a one-man team out there for the most part on Sunday. Trevon Moehrig also, doesn't do bad. However, both of those guys are going to go into free agency now. So they may not even be with the Raiders. Antonio Pierce, I think they stuck with that a little too much. And at the same time, what did they really give him? I think he had 3 or 4 different quarterbacks. They give you Gardner Minshew and say, build the Taj Mahal. I don't think we're not going to build it's not going to look like a piece of art when we're done here, or architectural wonder. He kind of got shortchanged a little bit. I've said it all along, or not all along, but I was saying it halfway through the season. Hey, Telesco did nothing when he was with the Chargers, nothing that ever got them to the big one. But to bring him in for 1 year, when you do these 1 year hirings and they barely get through their first term, and you don't really give people full chances to either make the calls or, I don't even know how much input Pierce had with the goings on player personnel, etc. But that says something about the guys above the general manager. Again, I was talking to some Raider fans and we were all in agreement. Al Davis knew football. And you've heard me say that throughout the season. Al Davis knew football. That doesn't mean his kid knows football. And he needs to, if he's got a Tom Brady there and Brady's got the right stuff between the ears, maybe getting rid of Telesco is a good thing. I think it is anyway. But maybe Mark Davis just has to really, really step back. If you want to go in, congratulations. And it's not the same when he walks into the locker room and says, just win, baby. It doesn't sound the same. That he's got to have his own shtick, and that's not going to happen. What's going to happen as far as coaching goes, somebody asked me, so who would you like to see on there? Of course, I got Mike Vrabel on my list. I've got Robert Saleh on my list because, again, I think he got screwed. And I think they've got to rebuild. The Raiders are going to be 3 years out from being competitive, I would say, at the best. At age 74, I don't know where his enthusiasm is or his desire or passion for the game. Pete Carroll, if Pete Carroll has 2 years left, he could at least build something, hand it over to somebody. But I don't think we're going to see Pete Carroll doing that. Vance Joseph, the Denver defensive coordinator, like him a lot. Steve Spagnuolo, the Kansas City defensive coordinator. I like him. And I also like Brian Flores, the Minnesota defensive coordinator, who has ties with Tom Brady. So I can very much see that happening. Those are on the coaching side. But where did I see, just watching, where they need improvement? They have no running game. They don't have a quarterback. Their offensive line was just getting manhandled. They were just getting pushed all over the place. Maybe they didn't get to the quarterback too many times, the Chargers. They got to him enough times, disrupted them constantly throughout the game. And they need to improve the defense. It's almost like you and I mentioned about Major League Baseball when they have to pick somebody and put them on the all-star team. Well, guess what? We can't just rest on Max Crosby. It can't be the Max Crosby show, and he doesn't want to be there anymore. He wants to go to a proven winner. He does not want to be in wearing silver and black. I don't care what he says. He wants to go somewhere because he's taken a pretty good beating his first few years here, and he's not getting any younger. He can talk to Aaron Donald about that and see and get his professional opinion. Good part is they've got $73 million in cap space, which I know cap space and other administrative costs are two different things, but you hit on it. $1 million? $1 million to maybe change Belichick's mind? Hey, why not? I don't know if Belichick is the character that would do that, would renege on a commitment that he has already made to kids and coaches and the university, but we'll wait and see. But it's all speculation at this point. You're not going to see Belichick. Oddly enough, though, one of the headlines I saw was Brady was hoping to talk Belichick into a reunion in Las Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. I swear, as I'm walking around outside or inside Allegiant Stadium, there was a guy several feet away, and I don't know why he'd be in general population, but I just kept looking, thinking, that's Belichick.
Oh, no.
I was convinced and he was just being real nondescript, just walking around, minding his own business. And I was on the level where you get into the suites and things.
Oh.
So, but I can't imagine they would have him go in through the front door, close to the service, the elevator.
Mm-hmm.
So the Raiders, they've got a couple long years waiting. They can improve on 4 wins, but they're, if you ever told me any time in the recent history of the Raiders that what you would see is 10-win teams in the AFC West and not one of them is wearing silver and black, boy, that's real discouraging. So now they've got 3, it's kind of like those conferences in men's basketball. Mm-hmm. And they go, oh, how many are they going to get in the tournament this year? And for the Raiders to not be one of them, boy, that's a real disappointment.
Yeah, it's a bit like I think it's what is an unusual or the usual suspects, the Kaiser Soze moment where you're seeing Belichick everywhere. But I really do think the Belichick buyout, I think, leans more towards next year. Because I agree with you. I don't think Bill Belichick is a moral compass, but I also think he has a little bit more character than to just dip out after 2 months or whatever it is.
Isn't it? It's his kids there too, right? He's coaching with his kid.
Yeah, but I don't believe. Oh yeah, you're right. You are correct. I'm sorry. Yes, Steve. Which that would be like speed running nepotism, because I think that was part of the. It's almost like, all right, when I'm done, haha, gotcha, I'm out of here. That would be.
Here, Junior. Keys to the car.
That's like buying the Lamborghini, telling the insurance company, "Don't worry, my 16-year-old kid is never going to drive it," and then driving it out of the parking lot. But anyways, I really do. I will say for the Raiders, obviously Max Crosby. I think if they get this head coaching job, I think the head coach is a lot more important to Max Crosby than the general manager, because it's who he has to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
If they get that right, I think they have a chance to kind of rejuvenate him. Now, the results will also have to follow, because I think he was quote unquote rejuvenated with the Antonio Pierce hiring. But you brought up, I think, kind of the main cog in all of this, in my mind. It's Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady wants to clean house, and you're right. I don't think it's right for 1 year for a head coach. I don't think that's fair. But it's certainly not fair for a general manager. However, something can be unfair, but also the right thing to do. It's just, the fairy tale eventually will get pulled over your eyes or pulled off of your eyes. Like, unfortunately, yeah, it's not fair to Tom Telesco or Antonio Pierce or any of these one and done coaches, but a lot of times it's the right thing to do. I think it was the right thing to do. And for the Raiders, at the very least, I think they have a path to get either a quarterback in the draft or, and hear me out on this, you talked about their cap room. I don't know if this is a Super Bowl winning, transaction, but I don't think you got to give really anything up, and you'd probably get Atlanta to pay a little bit of Kirk Cousins contract for you. I really think a Kirk Cousins 1 to 2 year, because I'm not in love with any of the quarterbacks coming out. When Shedeur Sanders is at the top of your quarterback list, I'm looking elsewhere if I'm those big teams. So I think Kirk Cousins is going to be heavily in demand even with that contract. And I really don't think a third or a fourth round pick, it's not going to cost the whatever fourth round pick the Raiders have or fourth overall pick to get Kirk Cousins by any stretch. And if you bring in someone that can at least start moving the needle in the right direction, I think Max Crosby wants to stay with the Raiders forever, but he wants to win, more importantly. If he can do both of those things, he's the happiest clam in the world, but he needs to win. And I really do think if they nail the head coaching hire, I would be very impressed to see what they could do there. I would be worried about, I don't know why, and I don't mean to troll or anything, but when Tom Brady is involved, sometimes the name Josh McDaniels gets thrown into places it should not. And I would hate to see Josh McDaniels 3.0. And I haven't heard his name or anything like that. But again, whenever I think of Tom Brady and who he's going to recommend, sometimes I think Josh McDaniels is the tip of his tongue. It's like a blackmail scheme. Josh McDaniels has some dirt on Tom Brady. And it's just always got to be very highly complimented. But final thing I'll say about the Raiders, in my opinion, Brock Bowers, I think you got a good one. Now you just need to get someone that can get him the ball. Because if you can have those, and look, Aiden O'Connell, again, I think there's something there. I just don't know if it's enough of it's there. He's not terrible. But anyways, it's on to next year for Mr. Martinez and all of Raider Nation.
I'll be real happy when Nick Chubb signs the contract and ends up in the backfield next year.
Wow, there you go. You heard it here first. That would be game. I mean, that would be huge.
That will make teams go, oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be. I mean, yeah, that would. It's kind of you caught me off guard on that one. I was not even looking there. And you know what? I hate to say it, and I don't. It's not just stating a fact, but he will be discounted, unfortunately, because of his injury history.
Yep, that's fine.
And the Eagles kind of got lucky a bit with that with Saquon, so maybe the same can pass themselves off to the Raiders. But for now, on to next year for Raider Nation. And for us, it is on to Super Wild Card Weekend. Wow. 6 games on the slate. Caveat, obviously, we are going to go chronological order at the moment. The Rams and Vikings will be played in Inglewood as planned. Obviously, there is a contingency plan to get that game moved to Arizona. That would affect the line. So plan accordingly. But when we're making our picks, that will be under the assumption that game will be played in Los Angeles. But plenty to get to before that. We are going to start in the AFC West. Where the Houston Texans, every single time the Houston Texans have made the playoffs, they have played at 1:30 Pacific time on Saturday. It is a tradition unlike any other. But the Chargers will be the opponents this year. The Chargers will be 2.5-point favorites on the road. The over-under sits at 42.5. Raider Jim, your thoughts? Chargers heading to Houston.
Yeah, well, I find myself in these situations where I don't look for them. They just kind of happen. So I'm in the down on the main floor of, I was staying at Harris, and I went over to the little food court area. I'm getting some breakfast, and I see this table full of Charger fans. And it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. You know, it seemed like it was 2 guys and maybe 6, 7 ladies, all had the same jersey on. A few minutes later, I'm over at the slot area watching my lady play a slot machine, and here comes one of the ladies wearing that jersey. She sat down, and I had my Raiders hoodie on, and I said, excuse me. I said, I saw you at the food court and noticed a whole bunch of you're all wearing the same jersey. Do you know Alvin Bud Dupree? And sweet lady looks at me and says, that's my son.
Nice.
And so we had a nice, you know, she was the sweetheart, just a sweetheart. Actually did a video with me when I, you know, introduced her and said, you know, what are you looking forward to this? She goes, oh, well, I'm looking forward to going out and beating those Raiders. And it was fantastic. With that, I have a new appreciation for, you know, kind of like a small, very outside interest in watching the Chargers, because she's so proud of her son, and she's happy that they only have to go to Houston. She's from North Carolina. To the game, Charger defense is number 1. Charger offense is number 11. The offense, a couple mistakes, but not too many. Of course, again, they were playing against a really bad defense on Sunday, but that defense was real. You know, it really stung to be sitting there and every now and then say, here, tackle by or assist by Khalil Mack.
Mm-hmm.
But and who is also going to be a free agent at the end of this one. But LA Chargers, 2.5, minus 2.5 going at Houston. Houston, another one of those teams like Pittsburgh, the stock has dropped in my eyes. They have not been domineering. The offense has not, you know, they've kind of sputtered. I mean, they had the game a couple weeks back. I believe it was against Baltimore, where they only got a safety. They got points and nothing else. Their defense is number 14. Their offense is number 19. You can't be the number 19 offense and play the defense like the Chargers and get to the next round. And I don't think they will. On the road, the Chargers already have been given the upper hand by the bookmakers, and I stand by that. I like that 2.5. So give me the Chargers 2.5. As far as the over-under goes, because of Houston's inability to put points on and going against that number 1 defense, give me a whole point, and I'll go under 43.5.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you on the Chargers side of things, or at least on the line side of things. I think the Chargers, especially 2.5. I mean, at that point, for me, anything under 3 is essentially kind of, in my mind, a quasi pick'em. And this one, I think the Chargers, you could see Dicker, the kicker, coming out last second, kicking a field goal. Although I will say, it would be an absolute nightmare for any kicking situation for the game to come down to any kicking situation for the Chargers with their history in the playoffs. But I will say that Justin Herbert and really Jim Harbaugh and that whole staff have done a really yeoman's work with the offense. It's been a big question of who their main targets would be. And now Ladd McConkey looks like an absolute beast.
He's incredible.
He is unbelievable. And, you know, he was good at Georgia, but with all due respect, I did not see him being able to make this type of impact, especially right away. And they really haven't had, I mean, Quentin Johnson has had a really good game, I think 2 weeks ago, but he's also had some other infamous games for other reasons, if you know what I mean. Some of those drops that he's really cost them. But as you mentioned, this team has been able to win 10 games. They were in the playoffs comfortably, essentially. And they're the 5 seed. They are the best of the wild cards, and a big advantage. Now they get to play Houston, who is undoubtedly the weakest of the division winners. Maybe in all the divisions, all the conferences, I should say. Give me the Chargers minus 2.5. I think Justin Herbert does plenty to get the job done. And the Chargers defense suffocates CJ Stroud, who seems to have kind of regressed behind an offensive line that it happens in your sophomore year, but it's going to be tough for this team. I don't see them getting out of this, and not a huge home field advantage with the Texans either. So give me that. I'm going to go the other way. I do like the I do like the over in this one. I think this is a situation where we might actually even see either a pick 6 by the Chargers defense or accumulation of turnovers to where it sets them into a position to where they almost are forced to score almost, late, or maybe they're down 14 or, early in the fourth quarter and they got to go for it and they don't get it on their own 15. And next thing you know, Justin Herbert, little fade to Ladd McConkey, boom, we just hit the over with very little help from the Texans. So I think the Chargers get the job done. And I think they win pretty handily. And that pushes this over the 42.5. This is the 4-5. So if, this would be possibly a Kansas City matchup, depending on how, of course, they do the reseeding. So it's not the perfect bracketed, but we could possibly see Chargers, Kansas City round 3 if everything goes as planned this week. But moving forward to the the AFC North. And if we're going to get any game 3 times this year guaranteed, I sure am glad it is going to be Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Now, obviously, last time maybe didn't live up to the hype, but this is a rivalry that goes back very, very long time. However, it's very rare that you see a playoff matchup with a line like this. Baltimore is going to be 10-point favorites at home. The over-under sits at 43.5. Raider Jim, your thoughts? Pittsburgh at Baltimore.
Yeah, like I say, Pittsburgh is definitely the one that stands out the most with a dropping stock value. They lost their last 4 games of the season. They posted 1 win and 2 wins in December, but they have lost their last 4 games, including on the 21st of December to Baltimore. Now, they also beat Baltimore earlier in the season, so they've kind of split it. The first time that they played, it was low-scoring affair. Let me get the score here. I believe they only put up 34 points. It was 18-16. Pittsburgh won that one, and then, of course, Baltimore took care of business, doubling up the score, 34-17 on the 21st. But I think that says it all. If you look at those 4 losses for Pittsburgh, they have put up 13, 17, 10, and 17. That's not going to get you into the next round of the playoffs. And I have a feeling they're not going to be any more successful this go around than they were the first time against Baltimore. Pittsburgh's defense, while they're good, they're the number 8 defense, but Baltimore's defense is number 9. So they're really neck and neck. And I think the defense for Baltimore is going to keep them in the game. It's going to make it difficult for the Pittsburgh offense on the field. And the offense, Jackson's just going to do his thing. He's going to do what he's been doing all season long to get them 12 victories. So 10 points, I think that's a bit much. And at the same time, based on the last game, I guess it's not unreasonable. But I think Pittsburgh's going to give a little tougher game than that. So I'll take Pittsburgh plus 11 on this one. As far as the over-under goes, the only reason I'm going to take a half a point and go under 44 is because it is going to be 31 degrees. It might be a little bit of snow or a little bit of sleet out there.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on both sides of that, mainly because of the weather. I looked at the weather report. Looks like just kind of a sloppy day. Even for Lamar, I think it might be a little maybe difficult for him to kind of do his thing and be as explosive as we're used to seeing him in that kind of wet track, if you will. I'm going to buy a hook here and buy that half a point, obviously. Pittsburgh plus 10.5. I don't think Pittsburgh wins this game by any stretch of the imagination. I don't even think it's necessarily quote unquote competitive, but I do think that Pittsburgh has enough to keep it. I mean, like you said, 10 points is a lot, especially in a game where you see the familiarity. I mean, this is one of the biggest rivalries. You mentioned their first matchup. If 18-16 is not a perfect score for a Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, I don't know what is. I think that's exactly what type of football these two teams play. It's clunky, it's a little unorthodox, but it's hard-hitting, it's physical, and when they both get together, it's always kind of has the opportunity to be very, very close. That's why I'm in taking Pittsburgh 10.5. Would not be terribly surprised to see Baltimore just blow their doors off, but I just think this rivalry generally points to Mike Tomlin keeping it close. But I am going to go with the under. Again, if this game goes over 43.5, I do think that Pittsburgh probably can't cover. I think this needs to be a 20-17, a 20-14 type game for Pittsburgh to obviously be able to cover in that number, but also for Pittsburgh to be competitive and to give any clout or any cloud of doubt that they have any chance in this one. So give me the under on the 43.5 in this matchup. Moving on to Sunday. Both of those games were on Saturday. Just throwing that out there. But Sunday, 3 games. We have the start. It's going to be the first one, 10 a.m. here on the West Coast, 1 o'clock on the East. Do the math in the middle. Denver, they're heading back east to face Bills Mafia and those Buffalo Bills, the expected MVP, Josh Allen. And his Bills are going to be 8.5-point favorites. The over-under sits at 46.5. Our second AFC West team, as Raider Jim alluded to make the playoffs. It's 2 of 3. We're not even talking about the other one, obviously. But Raider Jim, your thoughts? Denver heads to Buffalo.
Yeah, everybody likes a Cinderella story of sorts. Everybody likes to see a good upset or potential for upset. Not going to be this game. Neither one. Cinderella. This isn't Cinderella going to the ball. All the shoes aren't going to fit. And Buffalo's just going to be Buffalo. I think now Buffalo wants to come out and really make statements in each of the playoff rounds. And they're going to start with Denver, the sacrificial lamb or the sacrificial bronco, if you will. It is possibly going to snow in Buffalo, but it's not 100%, which is surprising with all the stuff I've been seeing going on back on the East Coast. But as of last night, when I checked the weather, NFL weather site, it said possible only. At 46.5 points, I think they're going to blow that out of the water. I think Buffalo's going to put up 35-38. Denver will probably put up 17. Yeah, it's going to probably take us over 50 for sure. But Denver, even though they've got that number 3 defense, I don't think that it's strong enough to cancel out the number 3 offense in football, which is Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen is just too dangerous. Patrick Mahomes is dangerous, but Josh Allen is dangerous and big. So I just think it's going to be a one-sided game. And I will even take Buffalo to cover on this one.
Yeah. I am when it comes to Denver, it is very few stories. I think you could make the case. Bo Nix is offensive rookie of the year. I think you could make the case that Sean Payton is coach of the year. I think you could make the executive of the year is the executive of the year from Denver. I think they've been an incredible story. It's been one that went from joking early on to, we got to take this team very seriously. All that being said, thank you very much for coming, but it's time for you to exit. It's been fun, Denver. And again, Bo Nix has proven me wrong. The first 14 weeks of the season, I just kept going, no, this can't be happening. And it was happening, and it's continued to happen. This one, though, it's a bit much. Not just a Buffalo team that is experienced, very good, but this is a Buffalo team that, as you kind of mentioned with the sacrificial Bronco, this is a Buffalo team that is seeing red. And when I say seeing red, they just want to destroy everything in their path and hope that one of them is the Chiefs. And when they get through this rage, they look up and they have the trophy in their hands. Because every other way they've attacked the playoffs has not ended well. And I think for the Bills and Sean McDermott, there's a lot of pressure on this team. We look at them as kind of not so much the lovable losers, but, up until about 5 years ago, they were kind of like the Lions, like, oh, how cute. Look at what Buffalo's doing. Now they're a legitimate actual contender. But at the same time, we've never seen Josh Allen in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl. And we've never seen Josh Allen beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. So plenty of things to check off. And I just think Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, only one thing matters. I would not be surprised if they don't even care about the Super Bowl. They just want to beat Patrick Mahomes. And then whatever else happens. But I just think Buffalo is going to absolutely run through Denver. And again, if this was a boxing match, I think the referee would have to pull the Bills off of them. and just almost just call for the stretcher right away. With that being said, the over under sitting at, let me look, what did I jot down here? 46.5.
46.
I think we go over, and I know you talked about somewhat with the weather and things like that. Again, I think Buffalo puts up 38 points by themselves. I think Buffalo, again, like a lot of teams say, oh, well, you know, all you got to do is win that first wild card. You don't have anything to prove. Buffalo says, no, we are going to prove that we will. Like I said, I just think they're going to just blow the doors off Denver. I think this is the biggest mismatch of the weekend. And I say that with a ton of respect for what Denver has done this year. But just look at the roster, and at some point when the playoffs begin and the clock strikes midnight, Cinderella, it's over. The ball is over. But we shall see. I've obviously, unfortunately, been wrong. And if I've been wrong about anything more than this season, it's been the Denver Broncos. So with all that being said, huge asterisk. But I think Buffalo gets the job done in 8.5. I think I'm actually surprised. I would have thought maybe Baltimore would have got the 8.5 number and Buffalo got 10, but it is what it is. Denver did look impressive, even if it was against JV KC last week. But with that being said, moving to the afternoon game.
One more on Buffalo.
Oh, yes.
And I've got to just put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to think I'm a real jerk for putting it out there, probably. What are the odds that Tyler Bass joins the Scott Norwood club?
Wow. I mean,
I have to.
I don't think we're there yet. I think we literally have to get to conference championship versus Kansas City or Super Bowl, just because Norwood, that was in the they were both in the Super Bowl, correct? Yeah. So I just think wild card, maybe we're not at, but I mean, it's like the Chargers, right? Like every time in the playoffs, a kicker goes out there for Buffalo with the game on the line. If you're of a certain age, and even if you're not, I mean, it has to be like indoctrination 101 to the Bills. This is how we lost 2 Super Bowls. Like there has to be that pit in your stomach. And yeah, I think for Sean McDermott, maybe that's another reason they just tell Tyler Bass, unless we're inside the 20, we're going for it. Like we are going out for blood. We are not playing that type of game today. But yeah, I don't think you're being a jerk. I think you're just talking about what every Buffalo Bills subconscious fear is. And a lot of teams, you could throw the Bears in there as well. So yeah, it's not ideal, but I guarantee you Buffalo Bills fans would love to be in a situation where Tyler Bass has the game on his foot. I do think they like him, but at the same time, you're only good
this year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all fun and games early January, but eventually only one team gets a fun narrative at the end of this. So we shall see. But moving to the afternoon side of things, and my side of things, it is going to be the Green Bay Packers. They are heading into Philadelphia to face my Philadelphia Eagles. 4.5 point favorites are the Eagles. The over-under is 45. Yes, Raider Jim.
I just clicked on a page to see if we had anything new, and within the last 30 minutes, MSN posted up that the Eagles have said Jalen Hurts was a full participant in practice today and therefore is likely to play. So
perfect.
Looking good for you.
Awesome. So yeah, I do wonder if I did have it mixed up. Maybe tomorrow he has to take his full to make sure there are no lingering symptoms after that. So hopefully, I think he's about 99.9% there. And I do believe tomorrow is a self-reporting day. I'm not going to sit here and say that Jalen Hurts would ever lie about how he's feeling, but if he would certainly not be the first athlete to do that. And at the same time, as someone who believes in the free world, that's his prerogative. But anyways, with that being said, we are going to, and I think Vegas has gone into this mindset that this game will be played with Jalen Hurts behind center. Now, the other side of this is Jordan Love, because Jordan Love was doing a lot of shaking of that thumb last week. Obviously, a very I mean, it was a pretty big loss against Chicago because now, excuse me, depending how you want to look at it, Green Bay with that loss to Chicago ended up going from having to go to Tampa. Now they have to go to Philadelphia. And again, maybe I'm a little biased, but I would rather want to go face a team like Tampa than a team as fully put together as the Eagles. But it didn't happen last week for the Packers. I think they are kind of the NFC East or the NFC version of maybe the Steelers. Not as dramatic, but the stock definitely trending in the wrong direction for the Packers. 4.5 is the spread for the Eagles. I'll be honest with you. On the field, I think the Eagles are better in every facet of this game. Not by a ton, not the same discrepancy that we see with Buffalo and Denver. But quarterback play, I'm taking Jalen 10 times out of 10. I mean, don't even get me started. Josh Jacobs has had a fantastic year, but come on. The wide receiver core, Christian Watson is out for the year. Possible ACL, I believe is what I saw. So he's done. That's going to put them in a tough spot. The offensive line is average to above average, but I mean, the Eagles offensive line is elite. And the Eagles defense, maybe, I mean, I think numbers wise, they're second behind the Chargers.
Correct.
But I think even the Chargers defense would say, nah, that they got a little bit more dudes than we do. And you know, there ain't no Mason Crosby walking through that door for Green Bay. I'm still taking Jake, even with all of his troubles. Maybe their punter's better than Braden Mann, who's struggled lately. But I just think the Eagles take care of business at home. This is another team like the Bills that just have one goal, and it's getting to the Super Bowl and proving a lot of people wrong. In terms of the over-under, I like the under 45. I think the Eagles kind of just suffocate this team. I see this as a 27-10 Eagles victory. I think it's a slow burn, maybe a 14-10 halftime lead, and there are some people going up. Jordan Love made some throws, and then just absolute, just ground and pound in the second half and choke them out into submission. So give me the under. But Raider Jim, your thoughts, Green Bay at Philadelphia.
Yeah, all the way around, I think Philadelphia is superior in this game. I truly, truly do. The defense, like you said, their defense and offensively, they are going to win the battle of the trenches. They're going to win it on the defensive side. They're going to shake up Green Bay. They will probably be very successful at slowing down, at least, if not stopping Josh Jacobs. And on the other side of things, like you said, throw a couple, set up some mid-range passes, get in the end zone by the air, start off by the pass. Second half, let Saquon do his thing. Mm-hmm. Just hand it to him, because that's what he wants to do anyway. And I think he's going to have a great game. Maybe you start out that way, and if they just find out that they can push around the Packers defensive line and get past the linebackers, why not? Just, if it's going to work, don't fix it. Just let it happen. I like Philadelphia minus 4.5 in this one, but I'm with you. Over 45, I don't see it happening. I just don't. I see 27 to 13, 27 to 14, something like that. So give me the Eagles on this one to cover the spread, but give me under.
Yeah, two things I do want to just add. A.J. Brown did not practice today, again, Thursday, the 9th of January, because of a knee situation. However, that was planned. They fully expect him to play on Sunday. It was more of a rest day, but just wanted to get out in front of that. And then finally, didn't address it last week, but Saquon Barkley and obviously the Eagles, they sat Saquon Barkley, and I know there were a lot of people who were really mad about that. But again, I think these people need to think, and there were a lot of Eagles fans who were mad. It wasn't just random fans who wanted to get an opportunity to see history, which I guess I somewhat agree with, or I guess I somewhat understand. But there were Eagle fans who were truly upset that Saquon Barkley didn't go. It's not as simple as Josh Allen going out there and taking one snap and running off the field and keeping a record going. Not only are you putting Saquon at risk, but you're putting the entire offensive line at risk. And I don't think I need to explain or remind Eagles fans what would happen if we lost Saquon or any of those offensive linemen right for the playoffs, chasing a kind of a, I don't want to say pointless record, but if you're chasing a Super Bowl, it is. But anyways, just want to get my thoughts out on that. I thought the Eagles handled it brilliantly, and now we can go try and win a championship. And also I know there are a lot of people saying, oh, he was going to break his record in 17 games. He had like 45 less carries. So anyways, moving on. Washington, they are heading to Tampa. Another one of these teams in Washington, very similar to Denver. Wow, what a fantastic story with a rookie quarterback and new head coach. But anyways, the Commanders, they are heading to Tampa to face the Buccaneers. Buccaneers are going to be 3-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 49.5. Raider Jim, your thoughts? Commanders at Buccaneers.
Boy, those Commanders, I really do like what they did this year. I'm real proud of the organization for bouncing back from the turmoil that they had to play through, over the last few seasons before this. And what did these guys do? I talked about some of these teams and doing themselves no favors at the end of the season. Well, what the Commanders have done, they're riding a 5-game winning streak, including the Sunday before Christmas, taking down the Eagles. And I mean, my goodness, so it's not like these were all just gimme games. I mean, they won by 3. They won by 1 against the Saints. They blew out Tennessee, which, okay, say what you will about that. They had to take overtime to beat the Falcons, but they did it. They persevered. They didn't cave to that one either. And of course, they took care of business against the Cowboys in the final game. But now they're playing Tampa Bay, another team which just makes me shake my head that Baker Mayfield can go out there and do this magic that he's been doing. And maybe it's not even magic, maybe it's luck, but what have they done at the end of the season? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They won 7 out of their last 8.
Mm-hmm.
That's not bad at all. I mean, granted, they beat the Giants, they beat Carolina, they beat the Raiders. They did beat the Chargers, though. And so that is to say something that they, matter of fact, when they beat the Chargers in LA, they actually took care of business by 23 points. So that was a statement there. And defensively, it's funny because they put up 43 points against the number 1 defense. The Tampa Bay defense isn't that hot. They're not that good for them to put things under control the way they did that game. That's the game that's really standing out to me. Are they going to be that lucky against Washington? I don't think so. Commanders have a pretty good high-powered offense. They're toe-to-toe with Buccaneers when it comes right down to it. On the defensive side of the ball, I think that Tampa Bay has a little more on defense than Washington does. Washington can keep them in the game, but the thing they really want to do is they're just going to have to go high-powered on the offense. This is going to have to be a shootout. I saw somewhere along the way that they said, based on these odds and these stats and those stats and the other stats, that they're predicting Tampa Bay wins this game 27-23. So somebody is seeing 50 points, which goes right at what the line is or the over-under of 49.5. I tend to agree with this because even though there's a possibility of showers, I think it's just going to be probably the most explosive and exciting and evenly matched game that's on this 6-game ticket for this coming weekend. I like Washington's chances, but I think because they're at home, give me a 0.5 point, give me Baker and the boys -2.5, and let's go over 49.5.
Yeah, obviously, if you've listened long enough, you see a line of -3. It's only a question of whether or not which way the hook is going to go for Brandon. Before I get to that, though, I do want to talk about the Buccaneers and what happened last weekend and the difference between two franchises and the way they handle situations, okay? Obviously, last week, we all saw Mike Evans catch, I think it was like an 8-yard I don't know, out route or in route, whatever, to get 1,000 yards, essentially get a $3 million incentive. And it raised a lot of eyebrows because it essentially was called in a moment when they should have knelt on the ball and the game would have ended. So they essentially, if you want to think crazy, they put their entire season on the line, because that was a win in your in game, to get Mike Evans the money. Now, to be fair, it didn't really look like the Carolina cornerback had any interest in stopping Mike Evans. And to be fair, it's not like Carolina would have got the playoff spot. So, I mean, they were literally seconds away from Cancun, so you can't really get too upset at him. But anyways, me looking at the Buccaneers, a playoff team, a organization that in recent memory has won a Super Bowl, going out of their way to get their superstar a much-deserved incentive. Now let's focus our attention elsewhere, to a franchise that was once proud, that once was competing for Super Bowls, and once had a relevant owner, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. And what did they do? Well, instead of letting Cooper Rush take 6 snaps to get an incentive bonus that I believe would have amounted for 80 to 90% of his entire salary, they decided to finally start Trey Lance. Again, this is the difference in these two franchises. And at the same time, just as I will always buy a hook on a spread that has a 3-point line, I will always take the opportunity to smash on Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. But in terms of this game, I am going to buy that hook and give me the plus side of it. I think Washington is able to cover the 3.5. I think this is a field goal game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a plus, or if it's Washington on the plus side of it. I agree with you. I think this is by far the tightest in terms of talent of the 6 games this weekend. Give me Washington plus 3.5. I think Jaden Daniels, it's not a massively, it's not like you're heading to, Foxborough or Orchard Park. Tampa, yeah, it gets maybe a little loud, but it's not a terribly intimidating experience for a rookie quarterback. I don't think Todd Bowles really, puts the fear of God in rookie quarterbacks either. I think Dan Quinn has what it takes to get the job done. Give me Washington plus 3.5. I think it's a field goal game regardless. I do think we stay under 49.5 here. I understand, look, 2 defenses that maybe aren't great. They favor more towards the offensive side. Sometimes in those games, the defenses surprise you, and maybe all of a sudden we go into halftime 7-7. Well, it's going to go under at that point. I kind of see how that goes this way, or how this game goes that way. Easy for me to say, but give me the under 49.5. Moving on to the final game, and this will be the Monday night game, which, as a fan of a team that played in the Monday night game last year, has to be the worst bit of playoff hell. I'll tell you that right now. You go the entire weekend watching other teams win, and then you have to get through an entire work day before you can see your team play, and then you're thrown right back into the week. But anyways, this year, it's going to be the Minnesota Vikings at the Los Angeles Rams. Of course, as I mentioned before, bit of a caveat, unknown if this game will remain in Los Angeles. But as of right now, it is. Minnesota 1-point favorites, essentially a pick 'em, the over-under 47.5. Raider Jim, your thoughts, Vikings at Rams?
Yeah, I'm looking up here because I'm very curious about this. But let me look at one thing. Yeah, the bookmakers. Let me say this about that and the bookmakers. This I thought maybe that was a mistake. Minnesota's -1 right now. Look, folks, just because Minnesota comes in as a 5 or a 6 or whatever the hell they ended up at, you want to take a look at the division that they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And you want to take a look at the NFC West and see where the Rams are coming from. Look at them statistically. Minnesota's got the number 5 defense, the number 9 offense. Rams are coming in the 17 defense and the 20 offense. And everybody plays under a roof regular season. this is just set up. I guess you could take money line Minnesota if that makes your bet a little better or a little easier to stomach. But Minnesota's going to win this game. I think the Rams are going to be competitive. They've already proved that. They took care of business early December, whenever it was, when they took care of business against Buffalo, which that was a big statement back then. But at the same time, Minnesota, bar the games against Detroit, boy, they have just put together quite a season, and they are having a great time. I think they're going to come out. They're going to control the defense, which I think is really going to be the major thing we're going to see here. And their offense is going to be as consistent as it needs to be. They're going to stop the Rams, and I think that you go take Minnesota, take the money line. I'll drop a point. I'll take a point on that over under 46.5. I think they'll go over because I think we are going to see some points.
I agree with you. I do think we see some points here as well. I like the over 47.5. I think this ends up probably being one of the more exciting games of the weekend. I think this turns into a bit of a shootout. I am most intrigued in this one, more on the sidelines. I am so intrigued by this coaching matchup. Kevin O'Connell versus Sean McVay, Brian Flores versus Sean McVay. I mean, cut it up, slice it, however you want to make me ingest it. I want to ingest this game. I mean, it just looks incredible. I think Kevin O'Connell, obviously, look, we know what Sean McVay has done. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been incredibly successful. I think that's the trajectory we are seeing Kevin O'Connell. Now, ironically enough, and I don't know, and there have been a lot of people who have kind of said, well, who actually, would report that, or who actually would say that in the organization, but I don't know if you were watching last week, Raider Jim. I think it was on Fox pregame show, but they reported that Kevin O'Connell is reportedly, some of these teams and the Vikings would be willing to trade Kevin O'Connell because he is going into a contract year, kind of very similar. Unfortunately, I didn't mean to bring this up, but the John Gruden Tampa Bay Raiders trade from the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever that went down. I tell you what, if I'm a Vikings fan and this organization gives up Kevin O'Connell for a 30th overall pick, I would be pretty upset. But with that being said, in this matchup, I agree with you. I think Minnesota has more bullets in the chamber. I think this is Sam Darnold making a lot of money. That's what his thoughts process has to be going into this postseason. Give me Minnesota, like you said, money line. Now, I will say, I think if this game moves to Arizona, I think this line moves closer to 6. And that's why I do kind of say caveat. Look, if you're bullish on Minnesota like I am, lock it in right now. And I'm not being I'm not trying to be insensitive. I know with the game being moved and things like that, I'm not making it seem like, hey, let's profit off of this. But if the game gets moved, you just have to do what you got to do. And I do think getting Minnesota -1 on a neutral site essentially that's very advantageous. And yeah, over 47.5. Very excited about the last two games. I'm excited for all of them, but I think there's a lot of mismatches on the board here. And the NFL, a lot of times that doesn't necessarily matter. But I would be very surprised if we see some competitive games in the first 2 or 3 on the slate. But with that being said, Raider Jim, your final thoughts for this episode of the NFL Weekly.
Yeah, before we get final thoughts, let me ask you one question. It just rolled into my head. So if we look at the lineup for this coming weekend, and you had to pick one game, whether you believe it or not, what is the one game that you think has that potential to be the upset of the weekend?
You know what? As crazy as it sounds, well, I don't think it actually sounds crazy. I think it's got to be Washington for me, just in terms of looking at this. Obviously, if you want to look at it, well, what road teams have the opportunity? I think you then throw the Chargers into that, but they're certainly not the underdog here. But I would say Washington, but looking it over, as crazy as this sounds, I might put Green Bay number 2 on that list. And I meant to say it as well. And, if you are the first time you're ever listening to us and you see me wearing an Eagles hat and me talk so kind of, oh, Green Bay, they're this, they're that, blah, blah, blah. Eagles are going to dog walk them. And you go, oh, typical Eagle fan. I promise you, I normally am picking against the Eagles and I'm very negative when it comes to this generation or this iteration of the Eagles. But I really do think that it's probably Washington with the best opportunity just on the board, and then maybe even the Rams as well. But again, -1. I don't know if we call that really an upset. I don't know if you have any different thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah. I would tell you, if Pittsburgh somehow can miraculously come out in Baltimore and hold Baltimore to 10 points in the first half, watch out. That's going to be a good second half. That's just going to be bare knuckle stuff when they blow the whistle to start the second half. And like you, I think Washington would be my other choice. I think they just have this I don't want to call it playground attitude, but they're having a good time. They're almost both sides of the ball. They're enjoying it.
They're too stupid. And I don't mean this literally, but they're too stupid to know that they don't belong here.
Yeah,
whatever that phrase was, like they don't realize they're not good enough to be here, yet they're here and they've earned it. And they're not only here, they are
legit
a 5 seed.
Yeah.
No, a 6 seed because Minnesota's the 5. But yeah, it absolutely incredible what Washington has done. But yeah, it's going to be a very tough ask. But yeah, Raider Jim, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Here we are going into the playoff football. Wish everybody could have the weather we're having down here in Southern California, where it was up over 70 degrees. The sun's out, and maybe we'll have a cold streak coming up, and I hope we get some rain. All my thoughts go out to all of the folks up in Los Angeles area who are dealing with loss and the threats of the winds and the fires, and whoever you pray to, pray and ask that all the firefighters and first responders and the families affected are watched out, and that good things are there and they are kept as safe as possible.
Agreed. And on the same vein, obviously a terrible tragedy and still unfolding essentially. As we speak right now, and, we talk about football and, it's not that serious, obviously. But unfortunately, when it comes to things like this, we see people taking advantage of the situation. And a lot of times we see it in terms, and unfortunately, I've seen a lot of videos already of people looting. That's absolutely abhorrent. We are not in a looting stage yet. I guarantee you, there have been mismanagements, and I understand that, but I have not heard any shelter mismanagement or food or resource mismanagement. So there is no reason you need to be looting at this point. And the other part of this other, scamology, whatever you want to call it, or profiting off of terrible natural disasters will come later. And that's a lot of with scam charities. And it's something that, unfortunately, I've dealt with in the past. So I did look up, and I did just want to shout out. There are 2 ways. Well, technically there's 3. But one of them is sending inquiries to a P.O. box. I think we're all past sending letters that way. So in order to kind of check the registry of all California, these are only going to be for California charitable sites. So you'll have to find other resources for out of state. But you can head to www.oag.ca.gov/charities. That's Oscar Alpha George.ca.gov/charities. And that's obviously OAG phonetically, not actually Oscar Alpha George. But and then you can also call 916-445-2021. They will be able to verify whether or not it is a legitimate charity or not. And you can also take that charity, pop it into Google, and see what you get there. But the government resources I just gave you, Please do be aware of that. It's very, very unfortunate to see not only people taking advantage of the situation, but people taking advantage of people who are actually trying to help. So again, just be on the lookout for those scam charities, because you should, if you are able, you should donate, because there are going to be a lot of people who are going to need a lot of help in the coming weeks, and we need to make sure we are facilitating that the correct way through the legitimate channels. So make sure you do a little bit of homework on that side if you're going to do that, if you're able to do that. But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the NFL Weekly, presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.